Hello and welcome to our People broadcast. Today we are speaking to Mags from Epilepsy Action, talking about epilepsy, very important. And to me, I have epilepsy. Thank you for coming on this show. Talk to us.
What is your job role?
Thank you, Daniel, for that. So my job at Epilepsy Action, I work on our helpline. There are 6 of us, and some of us work part-time, some of us work full-time. So we answer telephone calls, we answer emails, we answer questions that come through from social media like Instagram or Facebook. And we've got a new live chat on our website. I don't know if anybody's seen it or anybody knows what live chat is, where you can type and ask questions through the website. So we've had to get very good with our typing skills to answer questions that way. We answer questions about epilepsy, so we might talk to people with epilepsy. We talk to families, we talk to maybe social workers or teachers and people like employers to answer questions about epilepsy, but just to talk to people, you know, who've rung the helpline or contacted us for advice, really.
What is epilepsy?
Okay, so this is the tricky one, isn't it? Okay, it is quite complicated, is epilepsy. So it's a medical condition, and it's a condition that affects your brain. Basically, we all have electrical activity happening in our brains all the time, and it's the way that our brain sends messages to our bodies to move or think or, you know, to be able to talk to people. And what happens with epilepsy is there are some changes in your brain which affects this electrical activity, and this electrical activity can become disrupted. Sometimes, and that causes you to have a seizure. The disruption to the electrical activity is what causes you to have a seizure. Sometimes doctors can find a reason for this disruption to the electrical activity. So it might be a head injury. It might be something that happened, how your brain developed before you were born. It might be something in your genes that you've inherited from your parents. But for a lot of times, about a third of people, we don't know why epilepsy starts. So there's still a lot that we need to find out about epilepsy. And there's still a lot of research that needs to be done.
Are there tests for epilepsy? How can you get tested for epilepsy?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, Shannon. Okay, so there are some tests that that doctors will use. The first one is we shorten them, but I'll say the long names as well. So the first one is an MRI scan, and that's, I have to read this, a magnetic resonance imaging test. And that's when it's a bit like a big washing machine that you lie on a bed, and they put this machine around your head, and that takes pictures of your brain in really fine detail. So that's trying to look to see if there's anything that they can see, any changes or damages to your brain. The other test that they might do is called an EEG test or an electroencephalogram test. And that's when they might put little electrodes on your head, on your scalp, to see if they can pick up what's happening to the electricity in your brain. So you might have both of those tests if you've been tested for epilepsy. But as well as that, doctors are trained to diagnose epilepsy from your symptoms. So if you've had a seizure, what happened before that, what happened during it, what happened afterwards. And they wouldn't usually diagnose epilepsy unless you've had more than one seizure, you know. It's epilepsy is a tendency to have seizures, so anybody can have a one-off seizure. They would test for epilepsy if there was more than one seizure, if you'd had more than one seizure. And how would you go about getting these tests? The first step would be to go to your GP, or if you've had a seizure, a lot of people go to A&E, probably in an ambulance.
How do you treat epilepsy?
Okay, thanks, Tom. So for most people, epilepsy is treated with medicines. That some people might only need to take one medicine, but some people might need to take 2 or 3 medicines. It's very individual epilepsy, so what works best for one person might not work as well for another person. So there can be a bit of trial and error in terms of getting that right. They're strong medicines, so they do have side effects, and things like feeling tired or changing your mood, things like putting weight on, are all side effects that people might have to deal with if they take epilepsy medicines. Plus you have to take them every day. You know, if you forget to take them, it can increase your risk of having a seizure. So there's a lot of responsibility there with your medicines, and I think people kind of, you know, we certainly talk to a lot of people on the helpline about medicines. So medicines is the first thing. Some people might be able to have surgery. The research now is improving surgery an awful lot, and you know, there are now new laser treatments that can be quite effective. The other thing is that some people might have what's called a vagus nerve stimulator. So that's like a little pacemaker that's put in just inside your chest, and that attaches to your vagus nerve, and that sends little pulses that interrupts the electrical activity to try and stop seizures happening. So there's a few things, a few treatments depending on your epilepsy. But for some people, even with treatments, they might still have seizures. Seizures can still happen. So we've a long way to go in getting treatments that are going to really work for everybody. Yeah.
What is an epilepsy seizure?
Okay, so I think you've picked the complicated one there, Kenny. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we all have electrical activity in our brains that help us move and send messages to our body. So a seizure happens when there's a sudden burst of that electrical activity, and this causes the messages in your brain to get disrupted, and the result is that you have an epileptic seizure. There are quite a few different types of epilepsy seizures. I think the one that most people know about are tonic-clonic seizures, which is when you lose consciousness, fall to the floor, and you shake. But there are focal seizures. I think you described that a little bit earlier on, Shannon, where you lost awareness. You could still do things, but you didn't know. Yeah, you didn't know you were doing it. So there are seizures that are like that. So they can be harder to see and notice. There are also seizures that are like little jerks, myoclonic jerks, and also absence seizures where people might just momentarily stop what they're doing and then carry on doing something. So there's quite a few different types of seizures. Yeah. The other thing is, just to add to that, that some people might have a few different types of seizures, not just one. And it's quite usual, and you might notice this, Shannon, to feel quite tired and sleepy and confused after a seizure.
How long do seizures usually last?
Okay, thanks, Shannon. So some seizures are really, really brief, a couple of seconds, and mostly seizures last between a few seconds and 2 minutes. If a seizure lasts longer than 5 minutes and you don't have a rescue medicine to stop that seizure, then that's a medical emergency. So, you know, when we talk about first aid, we talk about timing seizures. That's a really important question you've just asked, because if a seizure goes on too long, and we say in the first aid information 5 minutes, then it could be a medical emergency, and you do need to get an ambulance or call 999 or have some rescue medicine. But usually they're quite short.
How does epilepsy affect someone's life?
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I had to think about this. So I thought about what people talk to us on the helpline. You know, what people come to us for and want advice about. So one of the things that people will say is, you know, side effects of medicines, coping with taking medicines every day, and coping with side effects like feeling tired or lowering your mood. So that's one way that epilepsy can affect your life, taking medicines that you have to take to help keep you safe with your seizures, but they do have an effect. Another thing that people talk about is that not knowing when a seizure is going to happen. So, you know, they might worry, am I safe to go out? Can I go and do this? Is it okay to do this? And worrying about how other people are going to react, because not everybody's as helpful as they could be. And I think that's certainly something that people will talk to us about. So things like doing a bit of pre-planning, you know, thinking about your safety, whether that's an ID bracelet, whether that's having somebody with you, whether that's looking at where you're going to make sure that there's, you know, that it's safe. With planning, you can do more. You know, you can say, right, okay, I've got a way of managing this, so therefore I can get out and I can do these things. And I think that's a lot of what we talk to people about, is helping them to feel that they can still do things with epilepsy, because it can feel quite scary worrying that you're going to have a seizure, and it can feel quite upsetting thinking about other people's reactions. So those are definitely things that I think can affect you with epilepsy. And I think the other thing is that epilepsy can affect how you feel. And this is something we talk about, that being hidden. You know, it's not like seeing a seizure, but if you have epilepsy, you might be, it's known that you might be more at risk of having anxiety and low mood or depression. So those things can go unrecognized for people. So I think, again, knowing that you can get support, that you can talk to somebody, that's really important.
Can you still go on nights out, play sports, and do activities with epilepsy?
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yes, you can. And it's really good to have a social life, and it's really good to be able to do activities. And epilepsy is very individual. So some people might have really well controlled epilepsy, so they might not have to think very much about, you know, their safety when they're doing these activities. But if you do still have seizures, you might have to think about your safety a little bit more and do a bit more planning ahead, or think about, you know, kind of what impact an activity might have on you. So things like having ID, having somebody with you who'd know what to do if you had a seizure, that can be helpful. Doing a bit of a safety check, you know, so some sports like swimming, horse riding, there may be additional risks that you might need to think about. So having a, you know, a little think about, you know, what would I do if, how would I plan for this? Who could I have with me? Those are things to think about. So, and things like if you were going to the gym, they always do a medical questionnaire at the beginning when you join a gym and things like that. So, you know, they do ask for medical information. And because the equality laws are in place, they do have to do that fairly. So, they will need to do an assessment and do a risk assessment and look at reasonable adjustments, but you shouldn't just be barred from doing activities. So that's also something important to remember. In terms of night out, people ask about things like, can I drink alcohol? And again, that's individual. Some people might find alcohol's a bit of a trigger. Some people find that they can drink a little bit of alcohol and it doesn't seem to trigger the seizures. It's worth monitoring things. And I don't know if you do that, Shannon, just to see.
I do that.
Yeah, I've done this activity. Did it make my epilepsy worse? Do I have to think about how to alter it a little bit, maybe come home a little bit earlier or whatever it is? But there's no reason why you can't do things.
Well, you could probably
Just
have one or
maybe-
two, really.
Yeah. And most people will say, I mean, we give that advice on the website. We say, stick within the NHS guidelines, but, no reason why you can't. But if you did find you had a lot of seizures after late nights or alcohol, it's possible that might be a trigger for you, but you can't assume that for anybody.
Are there special concerns for women who have epilepsy?
Yeah, this was a good question. I've not been asked this one before. Well, I have on the helpline, but not when I've done podcasts. So yes, there are some special considerations for women, and this is related mostly to your hormones, the estrogen and progesterone hormones, and the effects of epilepsy medicines. So, for example, some women might notice that they have more seizures around the certain times of the periods, and that there can be treatment for that. So it is worth keeping a diary to see if there's patterns and talking to your doctor. Some epilepsy medicines can affect contraception. So again, talking to your doctor to make sure that all the medicines you take are safe and will work together and not interrupt how each other works. And there's some special warnings about some epilepsy medicines if you're planning to have a baby, and this is quite important. There's a lot of the NHS advice talks about this. So some research has shown that some medicines can affect the development of a baby in a woman's tummy, before they've been born. So if you're taking some epilepsy medicines, your doctor will either want to change those before you start a family, start having children, or they might want you to take contraception that stops you from getting pregnant. We've got information about this on the website, and it is something we talk to people about because it can be very individual and it can be quite complicated. So the short answer is yes, there are special considerations for women, but it'll be different for everybody. So do get advice, that I think is the message.
What is your favorite part of your job?
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So I do, well, Shannon will know this. I like talking, but I really like listening to people as well. And I like helping people think things through and helping them to think about things that might support them or help them move on with the problem that they've talked to us about. So I think all of my work on the helpline I enjoy, but it's definitely the talking to people and listening to people. Yeah. And my colleagues, I have to say that.
What are special
Epilepsy.
action part of that future?
Okay, so I think we want we want all sorts really. We want more recognition for epilepsy. We want more medical knowledge. We want more research. We want to campaign more so people get a fairer deal. We want more people to know about first aid, so how to help somebody. So I think if I was to sum it up, we want to do our work to break down barriers and to increase knowledge and how to support people with epilepsy. And we want to, we've got support groups, and we've got a befriending service, and we've got a counselling service now in Wales and Scotland. So we want more support services for people with epilepsy as well. So that's in our plans.
That's all we have time for today's episode. Thanks again to Mags for coming in and giving us lots of good information about Epilepsy Action and let us learn more about epilepsy. A special thanks to Shannon for organising this show and sharing her lived experience of epilepsy. Do you have anything else to add before we end this show?
Only just thank you for inviting me and letting me speak. So I've enjoyed it, and I hope it's useful. I hope it's useful for people to listen to.
Tom, are
Thank
you
you.
there? Can you hear us, Tom?
Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes, thank you for the show today. I've enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Mags, and thank you for joining today's show.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mags, for teaching me a lot more about epilepsy.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Thanks
thank
to you,
you.
Tom, as
I've
well.
learned a lot from you as well, Shannon, listening to you. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.